The snow fell in thick sheets across the Wyoming plains that January morning in 1884, blanketing everything in a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. Lucas Quinn reined his horse to a halt, squinting through the white curtain at what he initially mistook for a boulder beside the frozen creek. His breath caught when the boulder moved, and he realized with a jolt that it was a woman, sitting perfectly still with her arms wrapped around her knees, her dark hair plastered to her pale face with melting snow. She wore only a thin dress, completely unsuitable for the brutal weather, and should have been dead from exposure already. Lucas urged his mare forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had been riding since dawn from Superior, heading toward the Thompson Ranch to deliver medical supplies his father had ordered from the general store, but this changed everything. The woman's eyes tracked his approach with an eerie calmness that unnerved him more than panic would have. "Miss, are you hurt?" he called out, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. His boots sank into snow past his ankles as he rushed toward her. She looked up at him with eyes the color of storm clouds, and the faintest hint of a smile touched her blue-tinged lips. "I was waiting for someone to care," she said simply, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling that racked her entire body. Those words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He immediately shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and draped it around her shoulders, then wrapped his wool scarf around her neck. "How long have you been out here?" "Never mind, do not answer that. We need to get you warm right now." 3 hours, I think, she answered anyway, her teeth beginning to chatter now that someone was paying attention to her plight. "Maybe 4, I lost track." "Jesus Christ," Lucas muttered, then caught himself. "Pardon my language, miss, can you stand?" "I do not know," she admitted, and there was something heartbreaking in her honesty. Without another word, Lucas scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, or perhaps the adrenaline coursing through him made her seem lighter. She did not protest, simply rested her head against his chest with a sigh that sounded like relief. He could feel how cold she was even through his layers of clothing, and it terrified him. "There is a line shack about a mile east," he said, settling her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. He pulled her back against his chest, wrapping one arm around her waist while holding the reins with the other. "Can you tell me your name, Violet?" she whispered. "Violet Patterson." "I am Lucas Quinn. Hold on tight, Violet. We are going to get you somewhere warm." The ride to the line shack felt eternal despite being relatively short. Lucas kept talking to keep Violet conscious, asking her simple questions that she answered in increasingly drowsy monosyllables. When the small wooden structure finally came into view, he felt a rush of relief so powerful it made him dizzy. The line shack was basic but functional, used by ranch hands during cattle drives and winter patrols. Lucas kicked the door open and carried Violet inside, grateful to find a stack of dry firewood beside the small iron stove. He laid her on the narrow cot in the corner, piling every blanket he could find on top of her. "Stay awake, Violet," he commanded, kneeling beside the stove to build a fire. His hands shook as he struck the match, though whether from cold or fear he could not say. "Talk to me, tell me where you are from." "Boston," she murmured. "Originally. But I came west with my uncle 6 months ago. He is a preacher. Was a preacher." Lucas glanced over his shoulder at her as flames began licking at the kindling. "Was. He died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "The church in Superior took everything, said his debts needed to be paid before I could inherit anything. They took the house, the furniture, even my mother's jewelry. I had nowhere to go." The fire caught properly, and Lucas closed the stove door before moving to sit on the edge of the cot. He took Violet's hands in his, rubbing them gently to restore circulation. Her fingers were like ice, and he could see the bluish tint to her nails. Frostbite was a real possibility. "Why were you out there alone?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "I tried to find work," Violet said, meeting his eyes. Something in her gaze made his breath catch. Despite everything she had been through, there was a strength there, a core of steel that refused to break. But no one wanted a single woman with no skills and no references. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house said I could stay another night if I paid her $2, but I only had 50 cents. She put me out this morning. Anger flared hot in Lucas's chest. He knew Mrs. Henderson, a bitter widow who attended church every Sunday and then spent the rest of the week making life miserable for anyone she deemed beneath her. The idea of her throwing a young woman out into a blizzard made his blood boil. "Why did you not go to the church?" he asked, forcing his voice to remain calm. "I did." Violet's laugh was bitter. "Reverend Thompson said I should pray for guidance and trust in the Lord's plan. Then he told me I could not stay there because it would not be proper, him being a man alone with a young, unmarried woman. He gave me a Bible and sent me away." Lucas closed his eyes, fighting the urge to curse. He had never been particularly religious, but in that moment, he found organized religion entirely contemptible. "So you sat down by the creek." "I did not know where else to go," Violet admitted. Her eyes were beginning to focus better, and color was slowly returning to her cheeks. "I thought perhaps it would be easier to just let the cold take me. But then I started thinking about my mother and how disappointed she would be if I gave up. So I told myself I would wait. If someone came who cared enough to stop, I would take it as a sign to keep fighting. If no one came—" She trailed off with a shrug. "I came," Lucas said firmly, squeezing her hands, "and I care. You are not going back out in that snow, and you are certainly not giving up." Violet studied him with those storm-gray eyes, and for the first time since he found her, genuine emotion flickered across her face. "Why? You do not even know me." "I know enough," Lucas replied. He released her hands and stood, moving to check the supplies in the shack. There was coffee, dried beef, some hardtack, and a tin of beans. Not much, but it would do. "I know you have been dealt a terrible hand through no fault of your own. I know you tried to help yourself before giving up. And I know that any town that would let a woman freeze to death rather than offer her shelter is not worth the dirt it is built on." He filled the coffee pot with snow and set it on top of the stove to melt and heat. Violet watched him move around the small space, and he could feel the weight of her gaze. It made him self-conscious in a way he had not experienced since his awkward teenage years. "How old are you?" Violet asked suddenly. 24, Lucas answered, glancing at her. "You?" 21. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "I know I look younger right now. The cold makes me feel like a child." "You look exactly your age," Lucas said gently, "and brave, for what it is worth. Sitting in the snow waiting to die is not brave. Surviving what you have survived and still having the strength to wait for a sign instead of just giving up entirely, that takes courage." Lucas poured water into 2 tin cups once it was hot enough, adding coffee grounds to steep. "My mother always said that the hardest thing in the world is to keep hoping when hope seems foolish. She would have liked you, I think." "Would have. She died when I was 12. Cholera outbreak." Lucas handed Violet one of the cups, wrapping her still cold fingers around it. "My father raised me and my younger sister on his own. Did a decent job of it, all things considered, though Clara would probably argue with that assessment." Violet sipped the coffee and made a face at the bitter taste, but she kept drinking. "Tell me about them, your family." So Lucas did. He talked about his father, a quiet man who owned the general store in Superior, and read philosophy books by lamplight. He described his sister Clara, 18 years old, and determined to become a teacher despite the obstacles placed in her path. He told Violet about growing up in Wyoming, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the harsh winters and brilliant summers, and the way the mountains looked at sunset. In turn, Violet slowly opened up about her own life. She had grown up in Boston, the only child of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. Her father had died when she was 15, and her mother had passed just 2 years ago, leaving Violet alone except for her uncle. Uncle Robert had seemed kind at first, but he had been deep in debt from gambling, something Violet had not discovered until after his death. The church had been merciless in collecting what they claimed he owed, and she had been left with nothing but the clothes on her back. "I should have been smarter," Violet said, staring into her coffee cup. "I should have hidden some things, kept something valuable to sell." "You should not have had to," Lucas countered. "The church should have helped you, not robbed you. That is what they claim to be for, is it not? Helping the unfortunate. That is what they preach," Violet agreed. "The reality seems rather different." The storm intensified as afternoon wore on, making it clear they would not be leaving the line shack anytime soon. Lucas did not mind. He found himself genuinely enjoying Violet's company, her sharp wit and dry observations about the world. She was educated, well-read, and had opinions on everything from literature to politics. It had been a long time since Lucas had met someone who challenged him intellectually. They ate a simple meal of beans and hardtack, and Lucas gave Violet the majority of his portion despite her protests. She needed the food more than he did, still recovering from her ordeal. As darkness fell, the temperature inside the shack dropped despite the fire, and Lucas piled more wood into the stove. "You should sleep," he told Violet, who was fighting to keep her eyes open. "I will keep the fire going." "Where will you sleep?" she asked, glancing at the single cot. "I will be fine in the chair," Lucas assured her, though the wooden chair in question looked about as comfortable as a pile of rocks. Violet hesitated, then said, "That is ridiculous. You saved my life today. The least I can do is share the cot with you. We can both fit if we do not mind being close." Lucas felt heat rise in his cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "That would not be proper. Neither is dying in the snow, but I nearly did that too." Violet's expression was matter of fact. "We are both adults. We can maintain appropriate boundaries while also being practical about staying warm. Besides, I trust you." Those last 4 words did something strange to Lucas's chest. "You barely know me. You found me dying and did not even consider leaving me there. You brought me to safety, gave me your coat, made me coffee and dinner, and have not asked for a single thing in return. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Violet patted the edge of the cot. "Come on. We both need rest, and you will be useless tomorrow if you spend all night frozen in that chair." Lucas knew she was right, even if the situation felt impossibly intimate. He removed his boots and lay down on the very edge of the cot, trying to take up as little space as possible. Violet made an exasperated sound and shifted closer, her back against his chest. "If we are going to do this, we might as well do it properly," she said, pulling his arm around her waist. "Body heat, remember. It is practical, not improper." Despite the awkwardness, Lucas had to admit the arrangement worked. They fit together surprisingly well, and the shared warmth made the cold night much more bearable. He could smell her hair, a faint scent of lavender that had survived despite everything. Her breathing gradually evened out as she fell asleep, and Lucas lay awake for a long time, marveling at the strange turn his day had taken. He had left home that morning expecting a routine ride to deliver supplies. Instead, he had found a remarkable woman who refused to surrender to despair. and now he held her in his arms while a blizzard raged outside. Life, he reflected, was strange and unpredictable in ways both terrible and wonderful. When he finally slept, he dreamed of storm-gray eyes and words that echoed in his mind. "I was waiting for someone to care." Lucas woke at dawn to find Violet already awake, watching him with an unreadable expression. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in the strange intimacy of waking up together. Then Violet smiled and the spell broke. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Lucas replied, his voice rough with sleep. "How are you feeling?" "Better, warmer." Violet sat up and Lucas immediately missed her warmth. "Thank you for everything." They breakfasted on coffee and the last of the dried beef while discussing their next move. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything gleamed white and pristine in the early morning light. "I need to get back to Superior," Lucas said, though the thought of returning Violet to that uncaring town made his stomach turn. "My father will be worried, but I am not taking you back to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house or that useless church." "Then where would I go?" Violet asked practically. "I still have no money and no prospects." Lucas had been thinking about this half the night. "My father needs help at the store. His back has been bothering him lately, and he has been complaining about not being able to keep up with inventory. If you can read and write and do basic arithmetic, you could work for him." "I can do all of those things," Violet said slowly. "But where would I live? We have a spare room." "My grandmother lived with us until she passed 2 years ago. The room has been empty since then." Lucas spoke quickly, worried she would refuse. "You would have your own space, and Clara would be thrilled to have another woman around. Father pays fair wages." "It would not be charity, just honest work for honest pay." Violet was quiet for a long moment, and Lucas worried he had overstepped. They barely knew each other, after all. Why would she want to live with strangers? "Why are you being so kind to me?" Violet finally asked. "And please do not say it is just the decent thing to do. Most people would have helped me yesterday and then washed their hands of me today." Lucas considered his answer carefully. "Honestly, because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing, someone strong and smart and resilient. And maybe because I know what it is like to lose everything. When my mother died, the whole world felt like it had ended. People brought casseroles and said meaningless things, but only a few actually helped in ways that mattered. I want to be the kind of person who helps in ways that matter." Violet's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I would like to work for your father, and I promise I will earn my keep. I am a hard worker." "I have no doubt about that," Lucas said warmly. "Now we should head out. It is about a 3-hour ride to Superior, and I want to get you somewhere properly warm." The journey back to town was cold but uneventful. Violet sat in front of Lucas again, and they talked the entire way, conversation flowing easily between them. Lucas learned that Violet loved Shakespeare and Gothic novels, that she could play the piano, that she had a terrible sense of direction, but could remember anything she read word for word. Violet learned that Lucas wanted to be a rancher someday, that he raised horses as a side business, that he secretly wrote poetry but had never shown anyone. By the time Superior came into view, Lucas realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He was falling for Violet Patterson. It was too fast, too soon, completely impractical and absolutely undeniable. Every time she laughed at something he said, every time she asked him a thoughtful question, every time their eyes met, he felt it. A connection that went deeper than gratitude or circumstance. Superior was a small town, just a main street with a dozen buildings and scattered houses on the outskirts. The Quinn General Store stood near the center, a solid two-story structure with living quarters above the shop. Lucas rode directly there, ignoring the curious stares of townsfolk who recognized him and wondered about his passenger. His father was sweeping the front porch when they arrived. Gerald Quinn was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Those eyes widened when he saw Lucas riding double with a young woman. "Lucas, what happened? Are you hurt?" Gerald called out, setting aside his broom. "I am fine, father," Lucas assured him, dismounting and then helping Violet down. "But we need to talk. Inside, preferably." Gerald's gaze moved from Lucas to Violet, taking in her worn dress and exhausted appearance. Whatever he saw in their faces made him nod without further questions. "Of course. Come in, both of you. I just made fresh coffee." The interior of the store was warm and smelled of wood polish and tobacco. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from flour and sugar to fabric and tools. Gerald led them past the counter to the stairs that climbed to the family's living quarters. Clara Quinn appeared at the top of the stairs, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. "Lucas, where have you been? We were starting to worry." Her eyes landed on Violet and her expression shifted from concern to intense curiosity. "Who is this?" "This is Violet Patterson," Lucas said. "Violet, my sister Clara, and my father Gerald. Can we all sit down? This is going to take some explaining." They gathered around the kitchen table, and Lucas told the story of finding Violet in the snow. He did not spare details about the church's behavior or Mrs. Henderson's cruelty. By the time he finished, Gerald's jaw was tight with anger, and Clara looked ready to march down to the church and give Reverend Thompson a piece of her mind. "That is unconscionable," Gerald said quietly. Quiet anger was always more frightening than loud fury, and Lucas saw Violet recognize this truth. "I knew Robert Patterson had debts, but for the church to take everything and leave his niece destitute, that goes against everything they claim to stand for." "Which is why I told Violet you might have worked for her," Lucas said, watching his father's face, "and that she could stay in grandmother's old room at least until she gets established." Gerald studied Violet carefully, and Lucas held his breath. His father was a fair man but also practical. "Would he agree to take in a stranger? Can you keep books?" Gerald finally asked Violet. "Yes, sir," Violet replied. "I helped my mother with her seamstress business accounts for years. I can also do inventory, handle customers, and I learn quickly." "The work is not glamorous," Gerald warned. "Long hours on your feet, dealing with difficult people sometimes, heavy lifting occasionally." "I am not afraid of hard work," Violet assured him. "I just need a chance." Gerald looked at Lucas, then at Clara, who was nodding enthusiastically. He sighed, but there was a smile tugging at his lips. "Then I suppose we have a new employee. The room upstairs is yours, Miss Patterson. Meals are included and wages are $3 a week to start. If you work out, we can discuss an increase after 3 months. Fair?" Violet's eyes filled with tears, and she had to swallow hard before she could speak. "More than fair. Thank you. I promise you will not regret this." "I am sure I will not," Gerald said gently. "Now, Clara, why do not you show Violet to her room and find her some proper clothes? She can rest today and start work tomorrow." Clara jumped up immediately, clearly delighted at the prospect of a new friend. "Come on, Violet. I have some dresses that should fit you. We can alter them if needed. Do you like tea?" "I just got a new blend from San Francisco that is absolutely wonderful." As the two women disappeared upstairs, chattering like old friends, Gerald turned to Lucas with a knowing look. "She seems like a good person." "She is," Lucas said simply. "And beautiful, father." "I am just making an observation." Gerald's expression was innocent, but his eyes twinkled with amusement. "It was good of you to help her. Your mother would have been proud." Those words meant everything to Lucas. "I could not just leave her there. Of course not. You are a good man, son." Gerald stood and clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "Now, you should probably go deliver those medical supplies to the Thompson Ranch before they send someone looking for you, and maybe avoid mentioning where Miss Patterson is staying for now. Let me handle Reverend Thompson and the church council." Lucas had no idea what his father planned, but he trusted him completely. Gerald Quinn had a reputation for fairness and integrity that even the church elders respected. If anyone could address the injustice done to Violet, it was him. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Violet proved to be an excellent employee, quick to learn and naturally good with customers. She had a way of remembering people's names and preferences that made them feel valued. The store's business actually increased as word spread that Gerald had hired that sweet Patterson girl. Lucas found excuses to visit the store far more often than necessary. He would stop by to deliver eggs from his chickens or vegetables from his garden, to pick up supplies, or just to see if his father needed help with anything. Every visit gave him a chance to talk with Violet, and every conversation made him more certain that she was someone special. Clara noticed, of course. His sister had always been perceptive, and she teased him mercilessly when they were alone. "You are being very obvious, you know," she told him one evening when he showed up to dinner for the third time that week. "I do not know what you mean," Lucas replied, though he could feel his ears turning red. "You are smitten with Violet. And do not bother denying it because your face just confirmed it." Clara grinned at him from across the kitchen table. "For what it is worth, I think she likes you too. She always watches the door when you are expected, and she smiles differently when you walk in." "Really?" Lucas hated how hopeful he sounded. "Really? But maybe try actually courting her instead of just finding excuses to be in the same building," Clara suggested. "Ask her to dinner or to the town social next month, something that makes your intentions clear." Lucas knew his sister was right, but the thought of formally courting Violet made him nervous in a way that facing down ornery bulls never had. What if she did not feel the same way? What if she only saw him as the man who had helped her and nothing more? The next day, he was helping Violet reorganize the fabric section when he decided to take Clara's advice. "There is a traveling theater company coming to town next week," he said, trying to sound casual. "They are performing scenes from Shakespeare. I know you like his work, and I thought perhaps you might want to attend with me." Violet looked up from the bolt of calico she was holding, surprise written clearly on her face. "Are you asking me to accompany you socially?" "I am," Lucas confirmed, his heart hammering. "If you would like to." "If you do not, that is fine too. I just thought I would love to," Violet interrupted, and the smile she gave him made his breath catch. "I have not seen live theater since I left Boston. Thank you for thinking of me." "I think of you quite often, actually," Lucas admitted before he could stop himself. A pretty blush colored Violet's cheeks. "Do you?" "Constantly," Lucas said, deciding to be honest. "Violet, I know we have not known each other long, but I have to tell you that finding you in that snow was the best thing that has ever happened to me. Not that you were suffering, but that I was the one who found you, that I got to know you. You are remarkable." Violet set down the fabric and moved closer to him. "Lucas, I need you to understand something. Before you came along, I had given up. I was ready to just let the cold take me because I could not imagine a future worth fighting for. But then you appeared, and you cared when no one else did. You gave me a reason to hope again. So when you ask if I want to spend time with you, the answer will always be yes." Lucas reached out and took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. "I am glad I found you, and I promise I will keep giving you reasons to hope." They stood there in the fabric aisle, holding hands and smiling at each other like fools, until Gerald cleared his throat from the doorway. "Not that I am not happy for you both, but we do have customers waiting." The theater performance was in the town hall, and nearly everyone in Superior attended. Lucas arrived at the store to collect Violet, who looked beautiful in a borrowed dress of Clara's that had been altered to fit her perfectly. She had pinned her dark hair up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and Lucas had to remind himself to breathe. "You look wonderful," he managed to say. "You are not so bad yourself," Violet replied with a teasing smile. Lucas had worn his best clothes, a dark suit that his father had insisted he own for special occasions. They walked to the town hall together, Violet's hand tucked into the crook of Lucas's arm. He was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, of the envious looks other men shot his way, of the way Violet leaned slightly into him as they walked. The performance was excellent, featuring scenes from several of Shakespeare's most famous plays. Violet watched with rapt attention, occasionally whispering observations to Lucas that made him see the familiar stories in new ways. During the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet, he felt her hand find his in the darkness, and his heart soared. After the performance, they walked slowly back toward the store, neither in a hurry to end the evening. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead, and their breath created little clouds in the air. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Lucas asked. "Immensely. Thank you for inviting me." Violet paused under a street lamp, turning to face him. "Lucas, can I ask you something? Anything? What are we doing? I mean, us." She gestured between them. "I know we are courting, at least I think we are, but I do not want to assume." Lucas took both her hands in his. "Violet, I want to court you properly. With the intention of marriage, if that is something you would be open to. Eventually, I mean. I know it is early, but I have never felt this way about anyone before. You are intelligent and brave and kind, and I want to spend every day discovering new things about you. Is that clear enough?" Violet's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Very clear. And yes, I am absolutely open to that, to all of that, because I feel the same way. You make me feel safe and valued and like myself again. I did not realize how much I had lost myself until you helped me find my way back." "So we are officially courting," Lucas said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Officially," Violet confirmed, and then she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Good night, Lucas." She disappeared into the store before he could respond, leaving Lucas standing on the street touching his cheek and feeling like the luckiest man alive. Their courtship progressed steadily over the following months. Lucas took Violet on picnics when the weather warmed, teaching her to ride horses and showing her his favorite spots in the surrounding countryside. Violet helped Lucas with his poetry, offering suggestions and encouragement that made him braver about his writing. They attended church socials together, though Lucas took a certain satisfaction in being pointedly cool toward Reverend Thompson, who had never apologized for his treatment of Violet. Gerald had apparently had a forceful conversation with the church council about their handling of Robert Patterson's estate. While they had not returned the seized property, they had at least established a discretionary fund to help others in desperate situations. It was not enough, in Lucas's opinion, but Violet seemed to take some comfort in knowing her suffering might prevent someone else's. By summer, everyone in Superior knew that Lucas Quinn and Violet Patterson were a serious couple. They talked about their future openly, planning for the day when Lucas would have enough money to buy land and start his ranch. Violet had ideas about breeding horses specifically for families, gentle mares and geldings that would be safe for children. She had a head for business that impressed even Gerald, who had started letting her handle more complex aspects of running the store. One evening in August, Lucas asked Violet to ride out with him to a spot he had been considering for his ranch. It was a beautiful piece of land with a creek running through it, plenty of grass, and a small grove of cottonwood trees that would provide shade. "What do you think?" he asked as they stood looking out over the property. "I think it is perfect," Violet said honestly. "You could build a house over there near the trees, and the barn could go there, close enough to be convenient but far enough that the smell would not be bothersome." "I was thinking the same thing." Lucas took her hand. "Violet, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Always," she promised. Lucas took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Will you marry me? I know we have only known each other 8 months, but I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. I want to build a life with you on this land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want children with you if you want them. I want to grow old watching the sunset from our porch. Say yes, Violet. Please say yes." Violet was crying, but she was also smiling wider than Lucas had ever seen. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes. I want all of that, Lucas. I want everything with you." Lucas pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small garnet stone that had belonged to his mother. "It is not fancy, but it was hers, and I know she would have wanted you to have it." "It is beautiful," Violet whispered as Lucas slipped it onto her finger. "Perfect." They were married in September, in a simple ceremony at the town hall rather than the church. Gerald walked Violet down the aisle while Clara stood as her maid of honor. Lucas's best friend Thomas served as his best man. Reverend Thompson was pointedly not invited, and Lucas hired a circuit judge to perform the ceremony instead. Violet wore a dress that Clara had helped her make, simple white cotton with lace trim. She carried wildflowers that Lucas had picked that morning. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with all the love and promise he felt, and the gathered crowd cheered. They spent their wedding night in the room above the store that had been Violet's, though Gerald and Clara had tactfully gone to stay with friends. Lucas was gentle and patient, and Violet was brave and curious, and they discovered together what it meant to truly be joined as one. Afterward, they lay tangled together, whispering plans and promises in the darkness. "I love you," Lucas told her. "I will love you until the day I die, Violet Quinn." "I love you too," Violet replied, "and I promise to spend every day being worthy of the chance you gave me." "You were always worthy," Lucas said firmly. "I just happened to be the one lucky enough to find you." The first year of their marriage was not easy. They lived with Gerald and Clara while saving money for their ranch, and learning to navigate married life while under the watchful eyes of family required patience and compromise. But they were happy, deeply so. Lucas continued his work breeding horses while also helping in the store, and Violet managed the store's accounts with increasing skill. In the spring, Violet discovered she was expecting their first child. Lucas was beside himself with joy, already planning how he would expand their future house to accommodate a growing family. Gerald and Clara were equally thrilled at the prospect of becoming grandfather and aunt. Unfortunately, not everyone in town was happy about the Quinn's success. Mrs. Henderson, who had never forgiven Violet for surviving and thriving after she had turned her out, spread rumors about Violet having trapped Lucas into marriage. Some of the church ladies whispered that it was improper how quickly they had wed, implying that Violet must have been pregnant before the wedding. Violet tried to ignore the gossip, but Lucas saw how it hurt her. One Sunday, he made a point of confronting Mrs. Henderson directly outside the general store with half the town watching. "Mrs. Henderson," he said coldly, "I understand you have been spreading lies about my wife." The older woman drew herself up indignantly. "I do not know what you mean." Yes, you do. You turned Violet out into a blizzard, and when she survived despite your cruelty, you resented it. Now you are trying to damage her reputation because you cannot stand to see her happy. Lucas stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow becoming more menacing. Let me be very clear. If I hear one more lie about Violet from you or anyone else, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person you really are. There are plenty of people who remember how you treated your late husband, and I am sure they would be happy to share those stories. Mrs. Henderson's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and hurried away without another word. The gathered crowd began to disperse, and Lucas saw several people nod at him with approval. Violet, who had witnessed the confrontation from the store window, met him at the door. That was not necessary, but thank you. It was absolutely necessary, Lucas disagreed. You are my wife, and I will not let anyone treat you with disrespect. Not now, not ever. The gossip largely died down after that. Lucas had made his position clear, and most people in Superior respected him enough to honor it. Those who did not found themselves mysteriously unable to get credit at the general store or assistance from the Quinn family, which made them reconsider their positions quickly. In November, Violet went into labor on a cold night that reminded Lucas of the day he had found her. Gerald sent for the midwife while Clara and Lucas stayed with Violet, who bore the pain with remarkable strength. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lucas feared he might lose her. "Stay with me," he whispered, holding her hand as another contraction racked her body. "Please, Violet, stay with me." "I am not going anywhere," she panted. "I did not survive freezing to death just to die in childbirth. I am too stubborn for that." She was indeed too stubborn. At dawn, their son entered the world screaming his displeasure at being evicted from his comfortable home. The midwife proclaimed him healthy and strong, and when she placed the baby in Violet's arms, Lucas felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Violet whispered, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "Like his mother," Lucas agreed, kissing her forehead. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Violet said, "Nathan, after my father, Nathan Gerald Quinn." "Perfect," Lucas agreed. The inclusion of his father's name as a middle name made Gerald tear up when they told him later. Nathan proved to be a good baby, healthy and generally happy. Lucas threw himself into being a father with the same intensity he brought to everything else, changing diapers and walking the floor with Nathan when he was fussy. Violet nursed their son and sang him lullabies, her voice soft and sweet. By the time Nathan was 6 months old, Lucas had saved enough money to make an offer on the land they wanted. The owner, an older rancher looking to retire, accepted their offer, and suddenly their dream was becoming reality. They broke ground on their house in the spring, with help from Gerald, Clara, Thomas, and several other friends. Building the house while living elsewhere and caring for an infant was exhausting, but Lucas and Violet tackled it together. Violet proved surprisingly good at carpentry, having a steady hand and an eye for detail. Lucas handled the heavier work, and by summer they had a small but solid 2-bedroom house with a wide front porch. Moving into their own home was one of the happiest days of Lucas's life. Violet cried as she walked through the rooms, touching the walls that they had built with their own hands. That night, they made love in their own bed for the first time, with Nathan sleeping peacefully in the room next door, and Lucas felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Lucas started with just 3 mares and 1 stallion, carefully breeding horses with gentle temperaments and strong builds. Violet kept meticulous records of bloodlines and sales, and her business acumen helped them avoid the pitfalls that destroyed many new ranches. They worked hard from sunrise to sunset, but they were building something together, and that made every difficulty worthwhile. 3 years after Nathan was born, Violet gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Peter and Sarah. The births were easier this time, though caring for two infants plus an energetic 3-year-old tested their endurance. Clara, who had taken a teaching position in Superior, spent every spare moment at the ranch helping with the children. Gerald visited several times a week, delighting in his grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper. Lucas's reputation for breeding quality horses spread, and they began getting orders from ranchers as far away as Montana and Colorado. Violet expanded into training as well, working with young horses to ensure they would be safe and reliable for families. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the daily work, and the property began to feel like a real working ranch. Nathan grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, already dreaming of being a rancher like Lucas. The twins were 2 years old and into everything, keeping Violet constantly busy. Life was chaotic and exhausting and perfect. One evening, after the children were finally asleep and the ranch hands had gone to their bunkhouse, Lucas and Violet sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You ever think about that day?" Violet asked, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder. "The day you found me, all the time," Lucas admitted. "I think about how easily I might have missed you. What if I had taken a different route? What if the snow had been too thick to see you? What if I had been in a hurry and not stopped?" "But you did stop," Violet reminded him. "You cared when no one else did. You gave me everything, Lucas, a home, a family, a future. You gave me myself back." "You did that yourself," Lucas corrected. "You chose to wait instead of giving up. You chose to hope. I just happened to be the one who came along." "You will never convince me that meeting you was not the greatest gift I have ever received," Violet said. "Well, except for these." She gestured to the house where their children slept. "They are pretty great too." Lucas laughed, pulling her closer. "We made a good life, did we not?" "The best life," Violet agreed. "Sometimes I still cannot believe it is real. That I went from having nothing and no one to having everything and you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, the horses nickered softly to each other. A coyote called from somewhere in the hills and the wind whispered through the grass. "Tell me what you are thinking," Violet requested, a game they often played. "I am thinking that I am grateful," Lucas said. "Grateful that it snowed that day. Grateful that I took that route. Grateful that you were brave enough to wait for someone to care. Grateful for every moment that led me to you." "That is a lot of gratitude," Violet teased, but her voice was thick with emotion. "I have a lot to be grateful for. 20 years passed in what felt like both forever and an instant." Nathan grew into a fine young man who ran the horse breeding operation with skill and passion. He married a sweet woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Lucas and Violet their first grandchildren. The twins, Peter and Sarah, both showed interest in different paths. Peter wanted to study law and moved to Cheyenne for school, while Sarah proved to have Violet's head for business and took over managing the ranch's finances. Lucas and Violet added 2 more children to their family over the years, another girl named Caroline and a boy named James. Their house expanded to accommodate everyone, sprawling across the property with additions and modifications that told the story of their growing family. Gerald passed peacefully in his sleep at 72, having lived long enough to meet all his grandchildren and even one great-grandchild. Clara never married, dedicating herself to teaching and becoming one of the most respected educators in Wyoming. She remained close to Lucas and Violet, spending holidays at the ranch and spoiling all the children outrageously. Superior grew from a small frontier town into a proper community with schools, shops, and even a small hospital. The general store that Gerald had built passed to a new owner when Clara decided she preferred teaching. Reverend Thompson retired and was replaced by a younger minister who actually practiced what he preached about: charity and compassion. Mrs. Henderson died bitter and alone, having alienated everyone who might have cared for her. Lucas and Violet attended her funeral because they believed in showing respect even to those who had shown them none. But they did not mourn her. Through it all, Lucas and Violet remained deeply in love. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick children and injured horses, financial worries and family conflicts. They had celebrated birthdays and holidays, welcomed grandchildren, and buried loved ones. They had grown from young newlyweds into middle-aged parents, and finally into grandparents with silver threading their hair. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Half the county attended, a testament to the respect and affection the Quinns had earned over the decades. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and more food than anyone could possibly eat. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Lucas and Violet slipped away to their favorite spot by the creek. The cottonwood trees they had planted when they first built the house had grown tall and strong, providing shade in summer and shelter in winter. They sat beneath one now, Lucas's arm around Violet's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. 30 years, Violet marveled. How did that happen? One day at a time, Lucas replied. One sunrise at a time. Do you remember what I said that day, when you found me? I was waiting for someone to care. I will never forget those words. Violet lifted her head to look at him. Despite the lines that time had etched around her eyes and mouth, Lucas still saw the same woman he had found in the snow all those years ago. Strong, beautiful, resilient. I was not just waiting for someone to care about whether I lived or died, Violet said quietly. I was waiting for someone to care about me, really care, not as an obligation or out of pity, but genuinely. You cared, Lucas. From the very first moment, you saw me as a person worth saving, worth knowing, worth loving. That changed everything. Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. You were always worth all of that and more. I am just grateful I was the one who got to prove it to you. I love you, Violet whispered. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for 30 more if we are lucky enough to have them. I love you too, Lucas replied, and then he kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of 3 decades together. They were granted those 30 more years, and then some. Lucas and Violet grew old together on their ranch, watching it pass to Nathan and then to his children. They became great-grandparents, then great-great-grandparents. Their hair turned fully white, their steps grew slower, but their love never diminished. Lucas was 87 when his heart finally gave out one spring morning. He died in his sleep, holding Violet's hand as he had done for over 60 years. Violet, 84 and still sharp as a tack despite her frail body, held his hand and whispered that she would see him soon. She followed him 3 months later, on a warm summer evening as the sun set over the land they had built together. Surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, Violet closed her eyes for the last time with a smile on her face. They buried Lucas and Violet side by side beneath the cottonwood trees they had planted, their gravestones simple but meaningful. Lucas's read. He stopped when others passed by. Violet said, She waited, and love answered. The ranch continued for generations, the Quinn name becoming synonymous with quality horses and fair dealing throughout Wyoming and beyond. Every Quinn child grew up knowing the story of how their great-great-grandparents had met, how Lucas had found Violet in the snow, and how that moment had changed the trajectory of countless lives. On cold winter days, when snow fell thick and soft over the Wyoming plains, ranch hands swore they could sometimes see two figures walking hand in hand beneath the cottonwood trees. An old man and an old woman, or sometimes a young couple, but always together, always in love. The story of Lucas and Violet became legend in Superior and the surrounding area. It was told at weddings and anniversaries, a reminder that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances, that caring when others did not could change a life forever, that hope was worth holding on to even when it seemed foolish. And on the coldest winter nights, when wind howled across the plains and snow piled high, people remembered a young woman who had been brave enough to wait for someone to care, and a young man who had been kind enough to stop. They remembered that sometimes the greatest love stories began not with grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but with simple human decency and the courage to see another person's worth. The ranch house that Lucas and Violet had built with their own hands still stood after more than a century, modified and expanded but fundamentally unchanged. The porch where they had spent countless evenings remained, and couples still sat there watching the sunset, continuing a tradition that would never end. In the family Bible that had been passed down through generations, on the page where Lucas and Violet's wedding had been recorded in fading ink, someone had written a note in the margin many years ago. No one knew who had added it, but every Quinn child read it and understood. On January 15, 1884, in the snow and cold of a Wyoming winter, love began with 5 simple words. I was waiting for someone to care, and someone did. This is where our story truly starts. And so it did. And so it does, for every person who chooses to stop, to care, to see the worth in another human being. For every person who waits with hope instead of surrendering to despair. For every love that blooms against the odds and grows strong enough to last forever. The legacy of Lucas and Violet Quinn was not just the successful ranch or the generations of children who bore their name. It was the reminder that caring matters, that kindness changes lives, that love can begin in the most unexpected moments and last beyond death itself. Their story ended, as all stories must, but their love never did. It lived on in every Quinn who learned to breed horses with patience and care, in every business decision made with integrity, in every hand extended to help someone in need. It lived on in the land itself, in the grass and the trees, and the creek that still flowed where Lucas had first shown Violet their future home. And perhaps most importantly, it lived on as a story told and retold, a reminder that on the coldest days when everything seems darkest, there is always hope. Always the possibility that someone will stop, will care, will see your worth when no one else does. Lucas had stopped. Violet had waited. And from those 2 simple acts, a love story for the ages had been born, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with nothing more than an open heart and the courage to care.